Firstly, have any of you heard about role-playing games before? Okay, some of you. Live role-playing games? Yes. Okay. Still, my guess is that most of you have some idea about what this is. For role players, this is sort of the ancient Bible. It's the first red box of advanced Dungeons, or actually just Dungeons and Dragons. This is pretty long time ago, but this is still sort of the groundwork that lay the bricks for what we're doing now. However, it's not what I'm going to talk about. Neither am I going to talk about this, which is probably the most popular hobby in Denmark at the moment, children's role-playing games. In the forest, you've probably seen children at some point dressing up as orcs or elves or whatever, running around hitting each other in the forest with foam weapons. This happens a lot at every Danish institution, sort of. You will have groups of children playing role-playing games like this in the forest. You also have grown-ups doing this. There's a great long tradition for fantasy live role-playing games in Denmark, Scandinavia, actually, and the whole world. This is from Krigslive, a war LARP this year. Grown-ups going to a forest fighting each other with soft weapons. This is another example. People dressing up as pirates, going to a forest fighting with soft weapons. So that's generally what people think of when they think of role-playing games and live-action role-playing games. And it's not quite untrue. This is a map of LARP activity from 2012. So as you can see, a pretty large part of the world is actually engaging in this hobby in some way. However, something close to 95% of all these games are what I would call fantasy foam weapon-based games. So it's fighting games in the forest. And what I'm going to talk about today is the last 5% of LARPing. The 5% that's not about hitting each other with foam weapons, which is not about winning the fights, but which is about engaging with characters, experiencing new worlds together. So, just to set some ground rules for LARPing in general, I find this quote very useful, that LARP is a meeting between players who, through their characters, relate to each other in a fictional world. So LARPing is about playing characters who relate to each other in a world that's different from ours. LARP is also radically participatory, which means that as soon as a game starts, the players have the agency. The players do all the changing. They decide what is going to happen. Maybe you've had a director scripting the LARP saying that you're going to play the king. So that's what you're going to do. But you will decide what the king is actually going to perform during this LARP. And it's going to be decided in a relationship with other players. The player's body is the character's body, which means that if I play a character now, this is my character. My character is apparently wearing a hat. And my character is apparently speaking at some game conference. Which is to say that we use our body language, we use our costumes to portray the characters we play. Similarly to theater. There's no audience at LARP. It doesn't make sense, at least, to talk about audience as such, because it's an experience that you can only see from the inside. If you look at a LARP from the outside, it will look as real life. And real life is very often pretty boring to look at. So it's not very interesting as a spectator art, but highly interesting as a participatory art, where you engage into other worlds. Also, it's mostly not about competition. It's not about winning a LARP, in particular not in the tradition that I'm going to talk to you about, which is the Nordic LARP tradition, where we try to design stories together that give us interesting experiences. So for me personally, very often it's more interesting to play stories where my character will lose or have hard, tough experiences in the game than it is to try to get my character to actually win. Okay, so what I'm going to tell you about today is 4 critical strategies of LARP, which sort of illuminates the different styles that we see within this Nordic LARP tradition. Then these 4 strategies is escaping, exposing, exploring, and imposing. And I'll run through them pretty fast, as I don't have that much time, as you know. So, escaping. Some basic rules for this, which applies to most LARP as well, but not all. What you see is what you get. That means that when you engage in this kind of escape LARPs, where we try to create other worlds, where we can experience something new, a new world to perform ourselves in, we need a full illusion. We call that a 360-degree illusion, which means that everything I touch when I engage in this LARP is actually real in the LARP. If there's a troll, he looks like a troll. If I have to take a drink, I won't get a Coke, I will get a, if it's a medieval LARP, I will get my a wooden mug or whatever. So we have this idea of the full illusion. Whatever your character do, you will actually do. That is, you perform whatever you want your character to do. You don't say, I go over there and do something. You actually go over there and pick up whatever you're going to pick up. Immersive role-playing is extremely important, that you inhabit the character. You try to feel what your character is feeling. You try to, and this is sort of a quest for many role-players, that you try to get so far into a character that you lose yourself. And that's all about escaping. And lastly, the story of a LARP is individual. There can be some sort of main plot or main story, but the players will never experience the same story. We experience our own individual stories and see it from our individual perspectives, as we would real life. Okay, so to give you some examples of LARPs that work with this escape paradigm. Babylon, a few years ago, was a future LARP, sci-fi, low-tech sci-fi LARP in some way, where 7 different groups of people, some soldiers, some researchers, some journalists, had to go into this bunker where something mysterious had happened. And the point of the LARP was that there's been some murders, some secrets were going on. We had to explore what had been going on. But this LARP in particular bought into the 360-degree idea that the whole bunker system was a bunker system. It was an old fortress in Denmark. All the doors were hard-coded, so we had to hack through them, and so on and so forth. Another example is Dragonbane, a large LARP in Sweden in 2006, which were for around 500 people portraying 4 different civilizations meeting at this particular village to engage with the dragon. And they actually built a life-sized dragon on top of an old Finnish wood-cutting machine. So in this LARP, you could go somewhere and you could meet a full-size dragon and talk to it, and it could spew fire and all that. So that's an extreme way of going into this, this escape paradigm of LARPing, working a lot with the surrounding world, making it as true as possible. But that's actually quite close to the 95% of LARP that's going on everywhere. It's a general ambition to get as close to the fictional world as possible and not breaking the fictional world in this style of LARPing. It's not exactly the same if we go into LARPs that work with exposing. LARPs that work with this strategy tries to reveal the social constructed character of our real world, or what we call the real world, what you could also call the consensual reality. So these LARPs are about experimenting with new social norms or other social norms, trying to expose what we think of as real or ordinary or just the way it is or whatever, to get the players to think about how the world could be different in many ways. So a few examples is Panopticorp, played in Norway in 2003 and going to be played in Denmark in around a month. This is a LARP about an advertising agency. And the idea of the LARP is through a very humorous LARP, that is, getting the players to do ads for everything. How you can, some of the challenges will be, how can you make an ad that seems to be for a soft drink, but actually is about bashing gay people? How can you make a commercial that will make women look like objects as much as possible without actually getting hung out from saying so? This is about advertising and how advertising changes the world and how the social dynamics of advertising and the demands that we put on advertising in the advertising world actually sets some very strict rules for what can be done within that social construct. Another example, Brudpris, played in Sweden this year, I played this myself, was about honor culture and gender relations. In this LARP, the men had total control of their women. We feared women and the dangerous life force that they had within them. So to sort of tackle this life force, you had to suppress your woman. You had to make sure that she did what you wanted her to do all the time. And the LARP revolved around a wedding, a mass wedding, where the men from two different villages would sell their daughters to each other. And the point was that it was extremely important that these women got taken care of by men who actually had the strength to do so. So what we spent a few days doing was suppress women in this LARP. Make sure that they did whatever we wanted. Make sure that they didn't have freedom of speech. Make sure that they behaved as women should within this culture. And afterwards, this LARP has taught the players, at least so I think, a lot about how static the gender relations of our real world is. At least I can see in the relationships I have around me, my friends and their girlfriends and so on, how much we are not emphasizing power in these relations, how much power is actually in play in gender relations all the time. So these LARPs work to expose something, for me at least, changes the idea that we have a strict reality that is unchangeable, or at least gives some new perspective to what we otherwise call just the reality, the norm of the world. Okay, moving on to exploration LARPs. These are LARPs about testing something out that you wouldn't be able to do in your real life. It's about abstraction, thinking the world from a new perspective, experiencing situations that wouldn't normally be available. It's about, as I say here, exploring the cosmograms from a first-person view, discovering other people's ideas of the world. What is it like to be a rapist? What is it like to be a pedophile? How would we ever know? Well, maybe LARPs can teach us something about that. Maybe we can actually understand how people are experiencing different situations, how their social constructed world is working. Okay, so some examples of this. Delirium, played in Denmark a few years ago. A LARP played in a large theater hall that was blacked out. The purpose of the LARP, or the story of the LARP, was about love relations in an insane asylum. So all the players, all the participants, were supposed to play insane. But as we didn't want them to act as if they were insane, the surroundings were made so that they felt like they were insane. There were no chronology in this LARP. Normally you will have a story working in real time from A to B. In this LARP you could have the cleaning up after the birthday of the psychologist in one scene, and then the scene an hour later would be preparing for the birthday of the psychologist. And this helped giving the players the idea that they didn't have any control of the situation, that they were actually insane. We also had red objects, all red objects in the LARP, were objects that only you could see through your insanity. So if you had the spoon with all the holes in it that was red, you weren't able to eat the soup. Obviously, the soup would run through the holes. But it was only you who thought that there was something wrong with the spoon. Everybody else would ignore the red spoon and just see you being unable to eat, behaving like an idiot. So we used all of these different tricks to make the players have an experience of actual insanity. Get the experience of what it is like to be insane, and be institutionalized, and not be in control of your own social environment. Capo played in Copenhagen a few years ago was a LARP about dehumanization in a prison camp. So the LARP portrayed a prison camp in a near future Denmark, which is probably not as important as what actually happened. What happened in the LARP was that a third of the players would be the old prisoners who had already established a prison culture that was totally insane. They had been in a prison without guards for years and years, so long that they'd forgotten why they were there, why they were actually behaving like they were, but they were still teaching the new ones to do so. So when new players would arrive into this LARP, and they would arrive through a tunnel going into a big cage, they would get pulled out by the old prisoners, getting forced into the routines and daily life that were absolutely pointless and senseless in this prison. But they did it because they had to. They did it because it was the structure they had. And this was highly inspired by Primo Levi's accounts from prison camps, cassette camps during the Second World War. Well, one of the central points in his authorship is that the horror of the cassette camps were not as much as that the Germans did this. It was that they got all the prisoners to do this to each other. They got the prisoners to accept this social system. And at Capo, the players accepted this very fast. Of course, we had told them to do so. We told them that you have to get dehumanized. That is the point of the story. And they did what we told them. But they got an experience of what dehumanization is and how you can do this, how you can actually live in a prison camp, how you can do these things to other people that are so horrible in the right situations, or wrong situations, obviously. A last example on these exploration LARPs, Just a Little Loving, played for, it's going to be played for the third year now in Denmark. Just a Little Loving was about AIDS, or actually it was about love and friendship and fear of death. But it took place in 1981, 82, and 83, a bit outside of New York, at a party, a 4th of July party. Actually, two parties, a gay party and a party of cancer survivors. Some people having another party, and these two parties merging, having fun together, having loads of sex together in 1981. And then we woke up in the morning and we played something called a meta scene, a scene that's not quite part of the LARP, but is still engaging, and people died. The first people died from AIDS. And the second year we started being afraid. And the third year we actually knew something about AIDS and could handle it in some ways. We could help some of these people. So what we did was to engage with the problem of AIDS, the experience of AIDS, the fear of death, back in the 80s, which is also something that people are dealing with today to a very high degree. Am I running out of time? Yeah, okay. I'll run through the last ones. Okay, imposing, the last aspect of LARPing here. Imposing is about pervasive performativity, moving LARPing out into the real world, challenging consensual reality for other people. One example is the White Road, bunch of people playing hobos in Denmark, or landevejsriddere, knights of the road in Denmark, walking from Copenhagen to Helsingør as landevejsriddere, as hobos, and engaging with the real world, shopping, doing whatever they would, talking to people all the way, being hobos. System Denmark in 2005 played at the Toftegårds Plads right down here, building a slum part of town, slum city in a near future Denmark at a public square. You couldn't go into it, but you could look into it. You could see the people in there, which were playing the lowest caste of society, the C citizens. And the last example here, Conspiracy for Good played in the UK, which was what we call a alternate reality game, which you've probably heard a lot of, where people could engage in fighting against a fictive, or actually not that fictive, it turned out to be company in the UK, through a series of quests that you could engage in through this LARP. So these are the 4 critical strategies. The experience of LARP is obviously very diverse and different. I just want to give you one example, and then I'm done, of a player account from a LARP. And this is from Capo, the prison camp LARP. An extreme experience, hard, evil, exhausting, dehumanizing, tear-breaking, and terrible, but at the same time life-affirming and beautiful to be part of. It'll take me a long time to get all the emotions out of my mind and body, and I will have the need to talk about it again and again for some time to come. But not a single second have I regretted participating. I know that I would hate myself if I hadn't been part of the scenario. This, for me, says something about why we're doing this, what experiences you can get out of this. It's horrible to be there, but it teaches us quite a lot. And then I'm done. Here's some links for LARP. Thank you.